I am so excited to have with us today Claude Silver, and she is the first Chief Heart Officer and number two executive at VaynerX. And she's introducing a necessary shift. It's the time to embrace the complexity of being human at work. Her bold new book, Be Yourself at Work: The Groundbreaking Power of Showing Up, Standing Out, and Leading from the Heart, just came out last month. And she's making the case that authentic presence is today's greatest business superpower. She offers a human-centered roadmap for building trust, leading with the heart, and creating cultures where people just don't fit in. They actually belong. Claude, I'm so excited to talk with you about the new book.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, I read it cover to cover, and if anyone's watching on video, I have a whole bunch of marked pages. What I really liked is like you brought in your own personal journey and kind of like a very different way into the business world with your background and your experiences. And it starts out with an outdoor adventure, like a situation, and you learn all of these amazing things from your personal story that then you bring into the business world. So, Claude, I would just love for you to like paint a picture of like what compelled you to write this book and how did you like kind of think through organizing it?
Yeah. I mean, it's such an important question because writing a book, as you know, is a real labor of love. It is not something that is just like cheap and cheerful. You really have to put time and energy into it. And so, as you know, my story is I was hired by Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V, as some people know him, 11 and a half years ago at Vayner. And I was the first SVP that he hired, and my job was basically account strategy. So I was like the first adult, I would say, and had lived experience and had agency experience. And at that time, we didn't have anyone that had actual agency experience. And so that first year, there were some real highs for me. I had a team of 60. I loved them. It was like I was teaching a liberal arts education every day, connecting, really growing, fostering, nurturing them. And then the other part of the job was being with the clients. And I found probably within a few months that the work with the clients, while I enjoy people and humans, I'm just not interested in what color this should be, what text or font this should be. And I felt like I was kind of losing my soul, quite frankly. It was not how I wanted to spend my time. I only wanted to spend my time really working with people, and I love human behavior and all of that. So during that year, which was a dark year for me, is really as I emerged out and ended up resigning, that is when I said to myself, and I actually said to Gary, I'm going to write a book about the workplace. And so that's 10 years ago. And I didn't start even the process until COVID.
Mm.
So the but the reason I had been in the workplace for a long time and just seeing that people get very disenfranchised, they get triggered, they don't know how to communicate effectively. There is a hierarchical political game that's played for some odd reason
Mhm.
that is just full of fear and insecurity. But if you're on the other end of it, it doesn't seem like fear and insecurity. It feels like you suck. And um, yeah, I think we are spending so much time here. It just felt very foreign to me the years that I put myself in the back seat and showed up with a, hey, I'm here. Hi, I'm Claude. Hey, I'm here. Let's go, which is not me all the time. And I was watching other people do that. And I just thought, you know what? It's time to at least get this out onto paper. If it turns into a book, it turns into a book.
Yeah, yeah, I love that based on your own experience of having to kind of fit in versus like really be yourself. And there's all sorts of ways we talk about this, Claude, like bring your full self to work, then bring your authentic self to work, your simple message, just be yourself at work. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
appreciate, but we're in some challenging times where people are not getting that message from leadership. And there's these mandates and these, ideas that we should just be working more hours to solve these problems. And I'm just so curious at a time when this message is being challenged in more public ways by certain leaders. I'm just
Mhm.
curious, what would you offer as an anecdote to that?
Right. The antidote to not bringing yourself to work, why do I say no to that? There's the obvious reasons, like I just don't feel like someone should hide away in shame and not express themselves. But I actually think that what I'm suggesting in terms of that authenticity, you being you is going to drive your success. I actually think that's the real message here, which is it's much more of a proactive, offensive message, not rather than, no, I'm not going to bring myself to work because I don't know how to handle my emotions, or no one
Hmm.
else knows how to handle my emotions. That to me is, I would say, lazy if I have to actually put a label on it. That to me is chickening out. And that to me is shrinking. And that is what I suggest we don't do now. We take up space. We learn how to take up space by learning who we are.
Hmm.
And that journey of self-awareness, as we know, is a journey. It's going to ebb and flow and ebb and flow. And when we have our last breath, maybe we will have attained it. I don't know. But I do know that it is a journey worth going on. And it feels like the workplace, just like life, is a good place to give it a shot.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate your saying 'cause there's all this conversation about covering and code switching and not doing that. But the
Yeah.
actual message
Well,
is being yourself, is what you're
it
saying.
it is. And as you know, in the book, I do say, listen, I come from a very entitled place where I don't have to code switch.
Hmm.
I don't have to, there's nothing visible about me that might present a bias to someone that I know of. And so I am coming from a place of, okay, I know how to make myself safe now. And I had to work on that for sure. Um, but yeah, there are the people that just feel like, dang, you're always moving the goalpost on me, or I never get the feedback that Joey over here gets. What is that? Or I've seen a lot of people like me resign,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So it's there's nothing that is, I would say, I'm not suggesting anything transactional at all. I'm suggesting being present. Let's
Hmm.
start there.
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Well, and you have a great story in the book, probably my favorite page that really teared up as you had a team member that was vocal about being depressed at
Yeah.
work.
Yes, yes.
And they said to talk to you, which had to have made you feel, I mean, awful and thankful at the same time, I can imagine. But that conversation, that exchange that went back and forth, I'm just curious if you'd tell our listeners more about that.
Yeah. It's amazing. I still have the poem that I shared with him up on my wall. So it was during COVID, and everything was on Zoom or Google Hangout. And so most of the time, either I know who I'm going to meet with, I see their name, or I don't, and I open up the Zoom and, hey, I'm Claude. This person who I'd never seen before, was about 23 years old. He said, I'm Paul. My name is Paul. Um, and Chris told me to come talk to you. Now I know who Chris is, and I've been working with Chris for 7, 8 years. So Chris and I have a good bond. We've done a lot of coaching together. I've coached him quite a bit. And so I knew the minute that he said, Chris told me to talk to you, that there was going to be something questionable in what we talked about, that there was going to be a thorn somewhere. And so I said, hey, yeah, what is up? And he said, I'm depressed. And in that moment, there were several ways I could have communicated with him. I could have been, well, the sky's still blue, toxic positivity. I could have said, have you looked at our employee assistance program? Do you have benefits? Do you see it there? I mean, I could have done all of the things that all of them would have been okay, except for the toxic positivity one. Um, but something just said to me, you know what? This guy has something to tell you. Like, he's here, he's going to tell you something. So I said, well, what do you do when you get depressed? And he said, I write poetry, which was like, oh my God, slay me. Like, okay, here we go. And of course, I asked to hear his poetry. And he, being a very mature, self-aware person, said, I'll share if you share your favorite poem first.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a lot of favorite poems, but Love After Love by Derek Walcott is one of my most favorite. And I thought it would be very relevant to this person
Mm-hmm.
looking at himself in the mirror and greeting himself in a safe way, in an appreciative way, in a gentle way. So I read him Love After Love. And then he read me three poems and we were crying. I mean, just tears just coming down my face. And and afterwards he said, now I know why Chris told me to come talk to you. And I have the chills even just remembering that. It was a while ago, but it was so poignant that here is this person very raw
Mm-hmm.
and giving it a shot. He stepped forward. I didn't know him. He set up the meeting. And I just thought, you know what, this person really deserves something very real from me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ah, yeah, I mean, that's gotta make you feel special as a leader that you're able to have those moments. And then also like, oh wow, I'm worried about this person.
Yeah,
And to
that
me, I
too.
think this kind of brings up the conundrum of the subject of your book about authenticity at work. It's you have to kind of know your authentic self and be able to show up like he did in that moment to acknowledge the tough stuff and what's holding you back. And you need a leader that's going to be receptive to that, like you are, and has those coaching skills to meet somebody where they're at. So I'm just wondering, Claude, like you've probably seen that dynamic play out a lot in all the work experience that you have. Like, I know you have some great ideas about how to like journal and kind of things to reflect on to get to your own kind of self-awareness point so you can show up like that. But also on the other side, leaders have to be willing to kind of coach to that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, that's really the bullseye right there, because the organism has to come together in some way to on with some agreements that this is the not only the expectations of your behavior, but these are the things that we can do to help you get there, whether or not you're a leader, whether or not you're C-suite, whether or not you're a junior copywriter. So I'm very lucky that I work for someone and work with someone who's very vocal about company culture and very vocal about how we need to be treating each other as human beings, which gave me more license to speak about it, right? And and the work I do, for me, it's very spiritual work. I mean, it really ties into a whole life of a lived life of searching and understanding and whatnot. No one needs to know that here. They just need to know that not only am I going to show up for them and help show them, help shine a light where their roadblocks might be or some of their vulnerabilities might be, but also I'm going to shine a big light on where they are excelling and triumphing and giving it a real shot. So I get the question I get a lot of times is, well, that's great. I don't work for Gary Vaynerchuk. I didn't either for many, 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 many years. And I was still me. That never changed. So while I was in hierarchical political holding company, agencies, I still managed to do me and had my little posse
Mhm.
of little mentees around and whatnot because you find those people. But to your point, in the workplace, it has to be it has to be a give and take. It has to be what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And my proposition is becoming self-aware and understanding how to regulate your emotions is good for everyone. It's good for everyone. And that's why this book is written in the way it is, which is starts with the you. You are the CEO of you. You get to drive Claude's bus every day. No one else gets to drive my bus. Same with Julie. You drive your bus. All of that stuff. And then morphing you self-aware on a team, working with the intricacies of other personalities that may not be where you are. Conflict resolution, resilience, authenticity, appreciation, gratitude. And then the final push of the book is then you as a leader with a culture under you, with a culture around you, leading a company, leading a very, very large team, whatever that might be, and gradually graduating into, evolving into a person that feels more whole for themselves, and it's felt by the people among you. So
Mhm.
it's a journey, and I don't expect anyone to open this book and say, okay, yeah, I'm already doing this, or open this book and say, well, it's not for me. I think there's something in it for everyone, because if you really, really take it for what it is, yes, it's be yourself at work. It's just be yourself.
Mhm.
It's be
I know,
yourself.
and it's like a simple message, but it's also one that's difficult in real life to do. And you mentioned the excuses people say, like, "Oh, I don't work for Gary Vee. My boss would never let me be myself," or whatever, we kind of create in our head. What I appreciate about your book is you really make a solid argument. We always have agency. We always have choice. Even when those choices feel constrained, even when our agency feels like, ugh, like, do I really have the power to do something like this? I don't want to lose my job. We tell ourselves these stories. I'm just curious, Claude, like, what do you think really gets in people's way of living this,
Oh
being
my
this?
God. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. It's just fear. There's so, first and foremost, there's so much fear out there in the world right now that they're picking up on, whether or not it's AI, whether or not it's the change in administration and the policies and all of that stuff. I mean, there's a lot. If you want to live that way, there's a lot you could be afraid of. Your boss, your coworkers, the person in the elevator. You can choose to live that way, or you can choose to try to find happiness for yourself. Try to find a route that works for you. So I do think it all comes down to insecurity and fear. I'm not quite sure where that happens. Does that happen? Does it start in our families of origin? Does it start in school where we're starting to compete with one another for grades or for who gets the captain on the team? Probably. I mean, because we're humans and we're messy. Something certainly happens when we enter into the workplace. And it's not like college, it's not like education, it's different. It is really like you are less than me because I make 3 times as much as you, and my title has an S on the front of it, which means senior. And I think that is the construct that I think in many ways I'm pushing against. I would love a flat organization. I mean, I try to think of this organization as flat, even though it's not in many ways.
Mhm.
But flat in the way that everyone has agency. It's okay. You're safe to say that doesn't feel good to me, or you're safe to at least go someplace and talk to someone in confidence and say, someone said this thing in the meeting today, and I don't know what to do with it, but I know it didn't sound right to me. Can I just share it with you? You know?
Mhm.
So, you mentioned the agency, and that's really what I think life is about. And that's coming from someone like me who I never thought I would be writing a book. I never thought I would be a success. I mean, success with a lowercase s. I didn't see that for myself. I always thought I'd be the underdog and the late bloomer. And now I am like, yeah, I'm a late bloomer and I own that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in there. Yeah. It's just finding a way to tap into it. And I would say having some strong allies around you, and there
Yeah.
are people that can help you see. Sometimes we don't always see the gifts that we have. People put up the mirror and they're like, "Oh, do you notice how great you are at this?" And it's like, "Oh,
Yeah.
shoot."
You know what it is, I think also along that is I think somehow we forget that people are thinking about us during our day, whether or not it's your grandmother or your best friend or, the person you're about to have lunch with. I don't really know, but I do believe because I wake up thinking about and wanting the best for certain people. It's in my mind. And I'm not a party of one. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's how we are. But fundamentally, a person has to want to feel
Mhm.
freer, more liberated in the
Yeah.
workplace. They have to
Yeah.
want to do that.
I think that's part of the challenge. Like you mentioned at the beginning, the fear, the insecurity. Well, if I do admit I have power and agency and choice, then shoot, I've got to do something
Got to
about it.
show up. Yeah. Then I got to show up. And then you say, well, well, why lived an unexamined life? Why not go for it? This is it. This is it.
Hmm.
And as someone that is already in their 50s, like I can say, this is it. Not that I'm
Yeah.
going anywhere sometime soon, but I'm on the back nine, my friends.
Yeah.
So
But you
let's get on with it.
Yeah, you've left an incredible impact already and so much more to give, I know. I really love that, and I'm sure people tell you all this time, I love Chief Heart Officer. I love that title, right? For an organization that may still have the standard titling, and not that Chief Heart Officer is just HR, I know it's way more than that, but have more of a traditional people approach, calling human resources, which always makes me cringe. Like, I'm curious, Claude, what would you recommend knowing what you know about the Chief Heart Officer role? Like, what does that look like, and how could a company embody some of that?
Yeah. Well, I think every company can embody it because there are always going to be people in your company that are highly empathetic and that love to give.
Hmm.
There are people in your company sitting probably right across from you or right at the next table that that are oriented towards service, that are oriented towards being of service, being helpful, facilitating growth and change. So if you don't have a chief heart officer and you don't have those people that I just mentioned in your HR, then I would find those people and utilize them as culture champions, which is what I've done here to scale. That's the first thing. But the second thing is you have to have people in this position or positions like it that you trust, that are able to take their ego and go, this conversation ain't about me. So I'm going to be fully present because I'm okay here. Non-judgmental, but observant, and willing to ride the ride with someone, not take on their stuff, ride the ride. And as I continue to say, the one thing I wanted this book to do for anyone that read it was feel like you have my hand on your shoulder and this says, I got you and you
Hmm.
got this. And that's what
Yeah.
I want the book to do. And that is what a chief heart officer will do. And the chief heart officer, myself, will be very honest with you. There's no reason for me not to be honest with you, but it will come with a lot of warmth. It'll come
Hmm.
with the sincerity of compassion, you know?
Hmm. Hmm. No, I felt that. Those little moments in the book, the mantras, like the positive examples you set, it's you're not alone. And in the world where it can feel really lonely really quick, now we have to hide our authenticity. I think you give these, I think you called them heart stamps in the book. Did I get that
Heart
right?
prints. Heart
Heart
prints.
prints.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like heart
heart
prints.
prints.
Yeah,
They're
heart
these
prints.
little heart print moments. And you can feel that, and it's encouraging. It kind of feels like a conversation back and forth with some of the questions, so that if you're struggling with this, or just feels like no way would my company ever embody something like this. I think if you go into it with an open mind and think, well, maybe not everything we can do, but maybe there's one thing we could start with. And that's what I'm curious about, Claude. If people just wanted one step to take to living more authentically and having more authentic workplaces, what would you recommend?
Honestly, I think the first thing is doing your best to get comfortable with yourself. But
Hmm.
really, like whether or not you do that in a support group with a therapist, with a friend, in your journal, being okay with who you are. And for myself, I lived with a lot of shame for many years, as many of us do. The shame is a killer. So figure out what that pit is in your stomach and let's
Hmm.
try to remove it.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's going to take some time. That's going to
Yeah,
take
because
some,
otherwise you bring some of those insecurities, you bring those fears, and
yeah,
it's really hard
yeah.
to get
And
into this if you're harboring
yeah.
that.
And you'll either shrink in the workplace or you'll do the opposite. You'll come out with cynicism and toxicity. Either
Hmm.
way, it's not a win-win.
Hmm.
So the first thing really is just to get comfortable with yourself. Go through the book. There's easy exercises that I've done, obviously. And work with a friend. Do some, like there's people that want to do this work with you, that want to have a little posse, just like a book club. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is, being having that growth mindset and
Hmm.
having that yes and again, you need to know what you're open to and what you're not open to. So it's not a fire when someone says, "Hey, you want to go have lunch with me?" And you're like, "Oh, I can't," like
Right.
maybe it'd be the lunch of your lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. Say yes to new things. Yeah. Well, I love that. So take a kind of introspective look first and then, show up, and keep showing up and
Yeah.
find those coaches, find those allies around you. I love this, Claude. Thanks so much for putting out some
Thank
necessary positive vibes in the universe. Tell
thank
our
you.
listeners how they can support your book and follow your work.
Oh, thanks. Well, you can buy the book. That is the first thing. When I realized I didn't write this book for me, I wrote this book to share. So you can buy the book on Amazon or at Barnes and Nobles, or you can go to my website, claudesilver.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I love when people write me and I write them back. I have a heart to help, and I'm interested and incredibly passionate about making this world kinder and more tender so
Mhm.
that we all can feel like we can walk through whatever door is in front of us.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you for doing your part.
Thank you so much for having me.